If you want to have a high-quality render, then you must know the render elements. Remember, professionals start their work after the end of the render. So, post-production and photo editing should be taken seriously with render elements. In this video, we will see how we can extract the render elements and use them in Photoshop. Hi, welcome to MIMViz. But what is a render element? Images that show different parts of our render are called render elements. Our final render is the result of combining these images and elements. As you can see, we have different elements such as lights, shadows, reflects, refracts, etc. But for a better understanding of this topic, I have saved some of these elements in advance so that we can take them to Photoshop and combine them to get a final render. It's exactly what Vray does. So I go to Photoshop software and we go to the File section and then click on Scripts and select the Load File option. In this way, we can have our images in different layers in Photoshop. Otherwise, our images would open in different layers and we would need more time to combine them. So use this method. Here we have 7 elements that we want to combine. But one thing you need to know is that in Photoshop, we use the screen or lighten mode to keep the bright parts and remove the shadow parts. And we use multiply mode to keep the shadow parts and remove the light parts. But let's go to our elements. The diffuse filter shows the color and texture of the scene without any special effects such as reflections, shadows, and others. But the next element is the lighting, which only shows the direct lights. This means that the shadow parts are completely dark due to the absence of secondary lights. Well, according to the explanation I gave earlier, we put this layer on multiply mode. The next element is the global illumination, which shows us the indirect lights. You can also set this layer to lighten or screen mode, so that only the bright parts of this image remain for us. But the next element is the reflection. It shows us the parts of our scene that are reflected. I also set this layer to lighten mode. Let's go to the refraction element. It shows us the glass parts along with their background. Well, let's set this layer to lighten mode. But the next element is the ambient occlusion, which shows us the shadows in the corners of our scene. That is, it creates a shadow at the intersection of surfaces, and with its help, depth is created in our scene. But don't forget, in this element, instead of deleting the dark parts, we have to remove the white parts. So we also set this layer to darken mode. But as you can see, the elements are not always in the right place. So sometimes we need to edit them or delete parts of them. This element does not work properly in the bed part, so I set a mask for this layer. And with the brush tool, I paint the part that I want to erase. Don't forget that black color is used in masks to remove or hide. But the last element is the specular element, which represents the glass parts of our scene. We set this layer to lighten mode. Yes, and now we get to the final render that Vray gave us by combining the render elements images. So a render is the result of combining different render elements from our scene. But why should we use render elements? And why do professionals use render elements in post-production? To answer, it is better to go together and do post-production with render elements. But before that, we need to know how to add render elements to our scene. To do this, we go to the Render Setup window. And from the Render Elements tab, we can click on the Add button and select the elements of our choice. My suggestion is to always add Vray Denoiser, Vray Light Mix, and Vray Wire Color. Apart from these three, the materials I personally use are Vray Raw Lighting, Vray Raw Refraction, Vray Raw Shadow, and Vray Ambient Occlusion. You can find all rendering elements in this tab in the Vray Frame Buffer window. But let's start with Vray Denoiser. What Vray Denoiser does is intelligently blurs the image to reduce noise. Vray Denoiser reduces the resolution of our image to some extent. But in return, we can have an image without noise in a very short time. So I suggest you definitely use Vray Denoiser. But we don't see Vray Light Mix in the list of elements. What we have to do is select the RGB channel or the Effect Result channel and go back to the Layers tab in the Vray Frame Buffer window. Now it's enough to click on Source Light Mix, and now a list of all the lights in our scene is available here. This is great because now you can control all the lights in the scene in terms of intensity and color. I can select the lights outside my scene and turn them on or off, or even change their color or intensity. That's easy. I can play with these lights until I'm satisfied with the result. And then I can click on the Save button on the current channel. Now I can save it and even go back and change the colors again and have different results from this light and color game. But the next element is the Vray wire color element. How do we select it? When we select Vray wire color, what we see is a simple gray color. The reason is that I gave all the objects in the scene a gray color. Now just assign a different color to each object. I do this for all objects that I want to select and modify later in Photoshop. You may ask, what is the use of the Vray wire color element? But let's say you send this rendering to your client and he wants a darker fabric for the bedspread. Now, instead of having to render the scene again, you can quickly use the wire color channel to fix this problem in Photoshop. The only thing you need to know in this section is to assign any different color to your object so that you can quickly select them in Photoshop. I do the same thing in this scene. Before you render the scene, be sure to hide the glass if you have an external scene like me. Now, let's add another element called lens effect. To add it, we go to the Layer tab in the Vray frame buffer window. Now it's enough to click on the lens effect and activate it. Now we can add a glare to our lights. The power of this effect is controllable based on size and intensity. After rendering is complete, go to this document, save it, and click on Save All Image Channels. I choose them to be saved as separate files. As I said at the beginning of the video, to open all images separately in Photoshop. And we go to the File section and then click on Scripts and select the Load File option. But I usually use the Effect Result channel instead of the RGB channel. This is because the RGB channel does not save the frame buffer settings. But the Effect Result channel is a combination of V-Ray denoiser, RGB, and lens effect channels. And basically in the RGB channel, lens effect and V-Ray denoiser settings not displayed. So I choose the Effect Result channel as my base layer. Now I go to the Ambient Occlusion element. This can give more depth to my image. But as I said, we have to set the state of this layer to multiply. Now the bright parts are erased and the dark parts are visible. Well, now we have to increase the intensity of this layer from 100% to 20% to get the effect we want. But if you pay attention, this layer does not have a good effect on the bed part. So as I said, we add a mask layer to it, and with a dark color, we erase the parts we want. Well, now let's go to V-Ray lighting. V-Ray lighting shows us the effect of direct lights. We have to set it to multiply. And I increase its intensity from 100% to 15%. And you can see its effect in our scene. The next element that helps us is the V-Ray Raw reflection element. It shows us all the reflections of our scene. I set the mode of this layer to soft light, and I decrease its intensity. Now you can have more of the effect of the reflections in the scene. But I want to have this effect only in the wooden parts. So I go to the V-Ray wire color layer and I select the magic wand tool and I select the wooden part. Now I go to the select menu and I select the similar option to select similar parts. But some parts were selected by mistake, and they have to be removed from the select mode. So I go to the lasso tool and I keep the Alt key. And I specify the parts that I want to be removed from the select mode. As you can see, these parts are removed from the select mode. but we had a wooden pot under the bed. So I go back to the magic wand element and I keep the shift key and I click on this wooden part. Now we have selected all the wooden parts. So I turn off this layer and I go to the Vray reflection layer. Now it is enough to select the layer mask option from this menu. Now automatically, all selected areas in the mask layer will be white. And other parts will be black. Now the effect of the reflection layer only appears on the wooden parts. By turning off and on this layer, you can see its effect. But maybe I want to add some parts of this stone to my layer and see the effect of the reflection on it. Now I can go to the mask layer and select the brush tool. I click on the parts that I want to see the effect of the reflection. As you can see, these parts are displayed in white in the mask layer. And you can see the effect of reflection layer on those parts. Now we can see the final effect of this layer on our image. But the Vray watercolor layer can help us a lot more than this. I go to the Vray watercolor layer and I select the bed with the magic wand tool. And now I go to the main layer. And I change the color of the bed in this layer. To do this, select the color balance option from this section. And as you can see, I changed the color of this bed to cream color. Now let's increase the effect of shadows on the floor. I go to this layer again. And I select the floor part with the magic wand tool. And I use the similar option to select similar colors. And by holding down the shift key, I add this part to my select box. We exit this layer and go to the main layer. And now we select the curve option from this section. Now I change the lower part of the diagram to increase the intensity of the shadows. And I change the top part of the diagram to reduce the intensity of the highlights. Now let's see the effect of this effect. As you can see, this effect also happens on the ceiling. To do this, select the brush tool. And paint this part in the mask with a black brush. Now you can see the effect only on the floor. Even if you want to reduce the effect, you can decrease the opacity. Okay, now let's set the mood for autumn. To do this, we need to change the color of our plants and trees. I use the wire color layer again. And I select the range of trees. Now I go to the main layer. And from this section, I select the color balance option. It is enough to play with the parameters to get closer to the color we want. In the same way, I can do the same for other plants. And I use color balance again. Now you can see the changes. We were able to add an autumn mood to our image. Guys, these are render elements that I personally use. But there are other cases of rendering elements. My advice is to add only the necessary render elements to your render, because the more render elements you add to your render, the longer your render time will be. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and write us your comments. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next video.